For years, brain-damaging toxins have lurked in various jars and pouches of baby foods we trust to give to our little ones.
And this is the future of our country.
With untold damage to America's children. Tonight, broken trust.
It's sickening, and it could all have been prevented.
In an agency designed to protect us.
There is this failure on behalf of the FDA.
Because the FDA does not have our backs.
How did we get here?
For years, we've uncovered hidden poisons in baby food.
There is no requirement that these companies test for toxic elements like arsenic and lead.
I was not aware of that.
And who's failed to get it in check.
DC is broken.
This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable.
Thanks for joining us for this investigative half hour, taking an in-depth look at how those in charge of food safety are failing America's kids. I'm Lisa Fletcher. Food choices are some of the most important decisions parents make for their babies early in life. They're developing brains and bodies far more susceptible to toxins and their lifelong effects than ours. Parents expect, and babies deserve, food that is free of poisonous ingredients like lead and arsenic. Doesn't seem like a lot to ask in the United States of America, but apparently it is. For years, we've investigated the consistent failures of the FDA and industry to ensure safe food for infants and toddlers, failures that have yet to be remedied. Now, we've put it all in one place, the documented failures of the agency charged with protecting your health. From the unanswered demands by U.S. attorneys general to the repeated calls from Congress for the FDA to act, to the suffering of real families harmed by toxins in their baby's food.
Rudy is the best boy. He is the sweetest little boy. He loves to play. He loves blocks and building.
Rudy Callahan is a happy, active toddler, says his mom, Sarah. So, when the phone rang after a routine health screening, the news stopped the family in their tracks.
The Maryland Health Department called and said, "Hey, your son has lead poisoning." And we were shocked.
And confused. Home surveys and searches for sources of lead turned up nothing. Even an X-ray of Rudy's stomach left them without answers.
A work colleague told me that there was a recall, that the FDA had issued a recall for the Wanabana apple cinnamon fruit puree pouches. And my mouth dropped to the floor.
These pouches are now the subject of a massive recall and international investigation. The cinnamon, used to flavor the puree, was loaded with lead, 2,000 times above recommended safety standards. More than 500 people across 44 states have been poisoned, mostly toddlers, revealing not just the scope of this mass poisoning, but a problem we've been documenting for years. Heavy metals, lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury lurking in baby food, completely unregulated.
Wanabana is an horrendous case study in something we've been investigating for years, and there are still no enforceable standards. There are no limits set for these toxic ingredients by the FDA. What's your reaction to that?
It just seems like they don't care enough about this vulnerable population of people.
It's settled science that there is no level of lead known to be without harmful effects, especially for children. It's a neurotoxin that can have irreversible consequences on a child's brain development, lowering IQ, causing behavioral and developmental disorders, and central nervous system damage that, according to the CDC, can even cause death. Dr. Philip Landrigan is one of the world's leading voices against toxic metals in baby food.
It's not acceptable in a society such as ours to allow children to be exposed to these levels of lead in baby food.
But to this day, lead in baby food is not regulated. There's no requirement that baby food makers test their products to ensure safety. And it is at least 7 years after the issue first appeared on the radar of the feds. This is Dr. Sean Callan, toxicologist and neuroscientist, now the CEO of a lips analytics lab in Denver. In 2017, his team partnered with the nonprofit Clean Label Project's Jackie Bowen and performed the first comprehensive tests of hundreds of baby food brands for heavy metals. What they found was alarming enough to bring it to the FDA. and the agency called for a high-profile meeting that fall.
That call ended up being less about what can you do and more about is what we, a Lips and Clean Label Project, what we were telling them trustworthy or believable. And that, that obviously can be disappointing because you're hoping to move past that and get to the conversation around the solution. And that is not what happened.
After we had that initial call, I sent several follow-up emails of, hey, we can help you do this. What if we do this? All to which we didn't receive a response.
Callan and Bowen told us the agency went dark, ignoring calls to set limits for toxic metals in baby food, until 4 years later, when, in 2021, the work of this pair would bring the problem to a fever pitch. That February, armed with their data, a bombshell congressional investigation brought light to a problem that had lived in the shadows. It reads, "Baby food manufacturers hold a special position of public trust. Consumers believe that they would not sell unsafe products. Consumers also believe that the federal government would not knowingly permit the sale of unsafe baby food. As this staff report reveals, baby food manufacturers and federal regulators have broken the faith."
What responsibility did the FDA have to act on this information when they had it at least 5 years ago?
It first of all reflects a failure of government to do its job. FDA needs to establish standards quickly. In my opinion, as a pediatrician, the federal agencies need to act now.
The report revealed products as much as 177 times over the limit of contaminant levels set for bottled water. Among the worst culprits for arsenic, rice, common in cereal for babies. The Congressional Investigative Committee concluded that the FDA should require manufacturers to test their products, and the FDA should set limits for heavy metals in baby food. But they didn't. That same year, partisan politics prevailed, and the Baby Food Safety Act, which would have set limits on toxic metals in baby food, failed on the Hill. And 23 state attorneys general banded together to demand the FDA take action within months, not years. Yet the FDA did not set limits and rejected the petition. In 2022, we discovered the foods identified in the congressional investigation as dangerous appeared over and over again on states' approved lists of food available to low-income families through a federally subsidized program known as WIC, short for Women, Infants, and Children. WIC helps to feed nearly half of all infants born in the U.S. by offering families benefits to buy specific foods designated on a WIC shopping list. Devastating, said mom and pediatrician Dr. Anna Marie Temple.
You are passionate and angry about contaminants being in baby food. How much worse does it get for you when you find out it's in the WIC program?
It's devastating because the illnesses that are going around is affecting disproportionately the families that are economically disadvantaged. And they also happen to get the foods with the heaviest loads of heavy metals. It is unfair, it is unjust.
Across the country, in California, lawmakers got sick of waiting for the feds and the FDA to protect kids. They passed AB 899 that forces manufacturers to test their products being sold in California once a month. The law's architect, Al Murasucci.
California often leads the country in terms of fighting for consumer protections.
It's a done deal in the Golden State, taking effect in January of 2024. We have repeatedly asked for those test results and received nothing, calling into question whether manufacturers are actually adhering to the law in California. Back in Maryland, the Callahans are powerless, waiting to see if lead poisoning impacts Rudy's future.
Unfortunately for us, we live our day-to-day life loving him and being happy with him, but I think inside we're always waiting for the next shoe to drop.
Hundreds of other families are in the same position, and they want to know why. Why the FDA, despite promising action to limit heavy metals, has failed to do it. Coming up, our exclusive investigation uncovers erased deadlines and ignored opportunities to get this under control.
This is unacceptable. Completely unacceptable.
As one lawmaker is losing patience. Our exclusive interview, next.
We know about lead in paint and gasoline and the long-standing efforts to clean it up. But how does a harmful toxin like lead enter the foods consumed by babies? It's in the environment. It can get into the crops through soil, water, air, and processing, or even be added intentionally to falsify amounts of expensive ingredients. The FDA's theory about how cinnamon and applesauce became so severely tainted. Lowering levels of lead in baby food requires careful sourcing and testing to find crops that are grown in the least contaminated conditions. It would require baby food makers to closely monitor their supply chain, test their final products, and potentially pivot to cleaner sources.